Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video, and it's that time again, guys, for me to review some of my all-time favorite movies celebrating my birthday. Yes, and that's right, you read the title of the first movie I'm reviewing that's one of my, all-time favorite movies. That's right, and seeing as how this year it's celebrating its anniversary, that being from 1994, Tim Burton's Ed Wood. Yes, Tim Burton's Ed Wood, and this also happens to be one of Tim Burton's favorite films that he has directed. Yeah, so that's nice to see. I mean, come on, Ed Wood? What can you say about Ed Wood? It's a fantastic biopic film, and for this being a Tim Burton film, with Tim Burton and how he, has picked, movies to direct and so on, knowing Tim Burton, he is very careful on what projects to work on and to direct and so on, and give it that Tim Burton style that he always does, and Ed Wood is definitely one of them, and how, Tim Burton has a pretty good connection with Ed Wood himself. He shares some things in common with Ed Wood, most notably, Ed Wood and Bela Lugosi's friendship, how it's similar to Tim Burton and Vincent Price's friendship. Yeah, because when Burton was friends with the late legendary horror icon Vincent Price. Yeah, so one of the reasons, and, why Burton wanted to do this movie. And not to mention that this and The Nightmare Before Christmas were the first two films of Burton's to be distributed by Disney, especially with the Touchstone logo. I mean, if you know your history of Disney and Tim Burton, Burton used to be a Disney animator at the Disney Studios, but around 1984, after he released a live-action short film called Frankenweenie, Burton got fired by Disney because, Frankenweenie was too dark, says the company who would release The Black Cauldron a year later. Fast forward, and, even around the time when Burton was at Disney, he created, The Nightmare Before Christmas, and, yeah, because at first he wrote a poem, I want to say, a book of Nightmare, and, if Nightmare Before Christmas was to ever become a movie, and he realized that in the late 80s, he discovered that Disney had the rights to making a movie of The Nightmare Before Christmas, and thus he contacted Disney, and thus turning The Nightmare Before Christmas into a movie began, as well as plans for Burton to make a biopic of Ed Wood. At first, it was going to be distributed by Columbia Pictures. It was in development with Columbia Pictures, but they didn't want to do it because they didn't want to do this movie in black and white. And afterwards, Burton tried selling it to other movie studios like Universal Pictures, Paramount, Warner Brothers, up until Disney was interested in distributing this movie and allowing it to be in black and white, and allowing Tim Burton to take full control of the movie, and rightfully so, because, this is Tim Burton we're talking about. You don't push him, you don't oversee what he's doing, you don't do anything like that to somebody like Tim Burton, okay? Yeah, so I'm just saying, how much I am a huge Tim Burton fan, and, if you know Tim Burton, you know that a genius filmmaker like Tim Burton is someone you don't want to mess with, and what he makes, filmmaking that is. So, again, two films of Burton's that were distributed by Disney, The Nightmare Before Christmas and Ed Wood. Burton was unable to direct Nightmare because he was still busy finishing up working on Batman Returns, and had Ed Wood in pre-production, and thus Henry Selick stepped in to direct, and of course Burton still being involved as producer. And so, a year after Nightmare came out, then came Ed Wood. And yeah, from one Burton film to the next, being distributed by Disney and through Touchstone Pictures, how much of a huge success Nightmare and Ed Wood would become. Yeah, and also not to mention that, this movie telling the story of a young filmmaker who was making a lot of crappy films. Yeah, it's true, yeah. And not to mention, fun fact, the budget of Ed Wood cost more than any of the movies that Ed Wood himself made. It's true, and I thought I'd mention that, so yeah. Okay, enough said. As always, read the description / the story. Because of his eccentric habits and baffling strange films, director Ed Wood is a Hollywood outcast. Nevertheless, with the help of the formerly famous Bela Lugosi and a devoted cast and crew of show business misfits who believe in Ed's off-kilter vision, the filmmaker is able to bring his oversized dreams to cinematic life. Despite a lack of critical or commercial success, Ed and his friends managed to create an oddly endearing series of extremely low-budget films. Okay, first off, I also like to point out that Ed Wood is the first Tim Burton film where Danny Elfman does not do the music and score. That's because, A, Elfman was very busy and focused a lot more on Nightmare, and there was kind of a bit of an outfalling between Burton and Elfman, but it was patched up a couple of years later when they would reunite for Mars Attacks. So yeah, again, Elfman, he didn't do the music and score for this. This time, it was Howard Shore. And boy, if you know Howard Shore and his music, you know what would come next for Howard Shore. A famous movie trilogy centering on the One Ring. Yeah. Okay, so, and I gotta say, more on the music and score that Howard Shore gives in Ed Wood, fantastic, especially the opening to this movie, because diving into the movie now, because we have the Touchstone logo, this movie entirely being in black and white, because even the Touchstone logo, which of course it has to be in black and white, and you know what, I just don't get why Columbia Pictures would not do this movie with it being in black and white. What was the reason? I mean, did they do other movies in black and white at that time? I don't know. Maybe some of you guys know. You can let me know, as always, in the comments. But that was just strange for Columbia, just to turn it down, all because, this movie being in black and white. So, yeah. But you know what? It's a good thing that, it was Disney and Touchstone that, distributed this movie, rightfully so, and of course, the same goes for Nightmare. So yeah. Again, the opening to this movie, and we get an introduction from Criswell, and Criswell, who had worked with Ed Wood himself, and Criswell in this being portrayed by Jeffrey Jones. And yeah, if you know the Criswell and what he was like, he was telepathic, I want to say. Yeah, telepathic. Yeah, and the introduction that he gives, about Edward D. Wood Jr., and yeah, it was a really cool opening, and the opening music and the opening credits, just fantastic, yeah. And we see, in Hollywood, Ed Wood, played by the one and only Johnny Depp, and Ed Wood being Johnny Depp's second Tim Burton film, as he previously played another character named Edward Scissorhands, yeah, so, and what a coincidence, Johnny's first two movies of Tim Burton that he would star in, where he would play two characters named Edward. So it's true. And okay, so with Ed Wood, he is he's hosting a stage play. There's no press, and the show goes on, and we get our other characters in this film. We have Paul Marco being played by Max Casella, and Conrad Brooks being played by Brent Hinkley, and Bunny Breckenridge, if I'm saying the last name right, being played by Bill Murray. It's really nice that, we get to see Bill Murray in a Tim Burton film. Yeah. And you know what? Sometimes, it depends on which actor would fit in a Tim Burton movie, you know what I mean? Because, usually you would see Johnny Depp, Helen Bonham Carter, or a couple of others, and, you would sometimes see certain actors who would appear in maybe one or two Tim Burton films. And, it all depends on which movies of Tim Burton's, where they fit so well in, you know what I mean? And, in this case, Bill Murray, he was perfect, and he fits so well in Ed Wood. Yeah. And we also have Dolores Fuller, played by Sarah Jessica Parker. And after Ed Wood, she would go on to be in another movie of Tim Burton's, which being Mars Attacks. So they have this stage play, and afterwards, they get the paper to see what the interviews and reviews. Mixed up. What the reviews are on the paper, and they're not so good. Except for one that Ed Wood points out to them, saying that the costumes looked realistic. Yeah, I mean, the soldier costumes looked good, because the play was about, these two soldiers, they're in the war, and they see this angel, and this angel giving them the bird of peace, so they can, change their ways and so on. And Ed Wood assures his crew that, they did good, and he has no doubt that, they can succeed, stuff like that. But, he is concerned later on, what if he's wrong, and, what if he's let them down, and if not all of them are good? And even Dolores assures him that, he's at that age where, he's struggling. Ain't that the truth? And Ed Wood, he does have a job. I think it's it's him handling plants and flowers, I want to say, at a big major movie studio, and he's delivering a plant or something, and he even gets distracted by seeing live camels. He's interrupting a film shooting, and I think a friend of his tells him to come in and see this footage that he shot, this stock footage. And he tells Eddie that, this footage will probably never see the light of day. But Ed, is quick enough to come up with an idea for what this stock footage could be used for a movie, because of this stock footage of these herd of bulls running, and footage of these soldiers. Yeah. And when Ed continues on delivering a plant, a tree and such, he then overhears these two ladies talking about this proposed film project about a man who, it has to do with him either being if he's a man or a woman. Yeah. And Ed, of course, hears this, and he's intrigued by it. And he meets with the guy who's going to try to get this movie made. Georgie Wes, if I'm saying the last name right, played by Mike Starr. So Ed comes in to be interviewed by Georgie, and, why does Ed want to do this movie? Well, that's because he tells Georgie something that he's never told anybody, not even Dolores. He likes to wear women's clothing. And we do find out a little bit later on why he likes to wear women's clothing, when Dolores finds out, of course. He then explains to Georgie that, he's like, Georgie says, "You're a fruit," and he's like, "No, I'm not." And he even mentions that he did wear like women's panties when he served in World War II. Yeah. And even though he tells Georgie, why he wants to do this movie, it's because he likes to wear women's clothing, and he understands that feeling and what this character is going through in this proposed movie. Well, he doesn't get the job at first, and after he gets the job, he's roaming around the streets, and he stumbles upon this coffin store, and he happens to see someone testing out a coffin, and that being Bela Lugosi. Yeah, Bela Lugosi being portrayed by the late legendary Martin Landau. Oscar-winning performance. Yeah, because I can't forget to mention that Ed Wood won 2 Oscars. One for Martin Landau's portrayal of Bela Lugosi, and 2 for Best Makeup, because the makeup that was applied on Martin Landau, and the same goes for all the other characters, because, this movie being in black and white, and the time and setting of this movie, yeah, it was, and Rick Baker being one of them that won that Oscar. Rick Baker being a legend in Hollywood creatures, makeup, and so on, right there next to the late Stan Winston. I mean, if you look at what Rick Baker does, because he's the same guy who brought us The Gremlins, Harry Henderson, Jim Carrey's The Grinch, which he won an Oscar for that too, and rightfully so, because that makeup on Jim Carrey as The Grinch, fantastic, yeah. And, the makeup that Rick Baker and, others implied on Bela Lugosi on Martin Landau, fantastic. Not to mention, because Rick Baker had a face cast of Bela Lugosi and made molds of, Bela Lugosi's ears and nose, and, with that being implied on Martin Landau, and for him to look, closely to look like Bela Lugosi, just fantastic. And, the performance that Martin Landau gives, as Bela Lugosi, the lines, just everything, just fantastic. And again, he rightfully so won that Oscar. And, some dialogue that Bela Lugosi has in this movie, yeah, until I get to some of them. So again, Ed Wood, he stumbles upon Lugosi trying out a coffin, and, Ed Wood, he introduces himself to Lugosi and how much of a huge fan he is to him, of Lugosi and so on. Ed Wood then offers Bela a ride back to his home, Bela's home, because Bela does not have a car. He refuses to drive in the country, as he explains, and, and by taking transportation like a bus, and, Bela, saying, "There's my bus. Shit, where's my transfer?" So he doesn't have his, he can't find his transfer, and that's when Ed Wood offers him a ride, because, he has a car, and Ed Wood asking him, when's his next, big motion picture, and Bela Lugosi saying to Ed Wood that, "I have no picture, I'm no longer doing movies, this world does not give 2 F's about Lugosi," and, because he's holding a cigar, and doesn't take too long for both Ed Wood and Bela Lugosi to create a friendship, and Bela telling Eddie, how, women, they enjoy the horror movies like Dracula, you take a girl to see Dracula, and so on, yeah. And at Bela's home, because, the way Bela lives and how small his house is, and according to Bella, because, his wife, I think of 25 years, left him last month, and he's got 2 pet chihuahuas, and after Eddie drops him off, and, very soon, they can get together again, Eddie tells Dolores that, I met a movie star, I didn't get the job, but I met a movie star, and Dolores taking a couple of guesses, and, finally Eddie's like, oh, to heck with you. I met Bela Lugosi. And throughout most of this movie, because everybody is wondering if Bella had died, well, not yet, until that happens. And that's when it dawns on Eddie that maybe, with Bela Lugosi, he can make this movie, and now that he's become friends with Bela Lugosi. And he goes back to Georgie, telling him that, how this movie is going to, attract audiences is by having a movie star. And he shows a picture of Bella, and it doesn't take too long for Eddie to get the job, and Georgie tells him that, you can direct it, to do a script in 3 days, and so on, and yeah. And even Eddie gets Bunny to find transvestites, as extras for the movie, and Bella coming in, and Eddie explaining to Bella that he'll be a god, like the puppet master, controlling everybody's lives in this movie. And even there was one line that Bella said, and which was a good idea for Eddie to incorporate into the script. Pull the strings, yeah. And thus, the movie is a go. They start filming it, and some of Eddie's crew, like, as I mentioned, there is Paul and Conrad, but there's also cameraman Bill, played by the late Norman Alden, who's best known for playing Lou in the first Back to the Future movie, and doing a voice in Disney's The Sword and the Stone. Arthur's, stepbrother, I want to say. Yeah, him. There's also Makeup Man Harry, played by the late Leonard Chermo, if I'm saying that right. And there's also the Sound Man, played by the late Danny Dayton. And so they proceed on, filming Glenn or Glenda. That's the name of the movie. And when it comes to them filming Bela Lugosi, and Georgie, he's just like, what the heck is this? Like, what has Eddie done and wrote in the script and so on? And when it comes to Bella, because where they're filming at a small, studio, and Bella arrives, and, Eddie telling everybody to, make a good impression on Bella, don't, geek out or anything like that, and, Eddie does give Bella his money and so on, and, with them preparing to shoot Bella's first scene as, the puppet master, the god, in the movie Glenn or Glenda, we see, because when the makeup man Harry is applying Bella's makeup, on his arm, we can see that Bella has a couple of scars on his arm, uh-oh, what's going on? What was Bella doing to himself? Especially a little bit earlier, when Eddie was at Bella's house again, and it was around Halloween time, and they were watching Vampira, because Vampira was showing the movie Dracula, and Eddie just, he couldn't stand it whenever Vampira would interrupt, on movies like Dracula. But for Bella, and he says to Eddie, I think she's a honey, and just doing this, you will be a slave of love, and that, hand thing that Bella does, and Bella then took his medicine, but what kind of medicine was he taking? That's the thing. And, he feels much better, and one moment where, trick-or-treaters are at his house, he whips out the Dracula cape, terrifying them, but one kid who's dressed as a cowboy is not scared, and, he says, you're not a real vampire, those are fake teeth. And Eddie stepping in, how about these? He pulls out dentures, and that sends the boy flying. And basically, Eddie lost his actual teeth in the war, and so he has a pair of dentures, fake teeth, that is. So back to where, they're about to film Bela Lugosi's first scene in Glen or Glenda, one of the first shots that they're going to film with Bella. At one point, Conrad asks Bella for his autograph, and Bella is kind enough to, sign for Conrad. And Conrad then tells Bella one of his favorite movies that he was in. I think it's The Invisible Ray? Yeah, The Invisible Ray. And how much he enjoyed Bella being Boris Karloff's sidekick. Oh boy, you had to say it. You had to say it, and of course, Bella, he seems like, he's fine, and, Karloff, sidekick? Fuck you! Karloff does not deserve to smell my shit! That limey cocksucker can rot in hell for all I care! I had to, because I couldn't. It's such a good delivery of dialogue from Martin Landau. I'm telling you, again, his performance and portrayal of Bela Lugosi in Ed Wood is fantastic. And fun fact, because the movie Ed Wood, well, some of them were not too happy with what was in the movie. Like, the actual Dolores Fuller established that in reality, she did help Ed Wood with the movie Glen or Glenda, providing costume and wardrobes for Eddie, and the reason why Dolores left Ed Wood in reality. But you know what? I'll save that until I get to that, when it comes up, when I come up to when Dolores leaves Eddie. But also another person who was not happy with what was in the movie was Bela Lugosi's actual son, Bela Lugosi Jr. He established that his father was not a swearer. And, no hard feelings, and no offense, I should say, to Bela Lugosi's son and Dolores Fuller, because Dolores even established that she was hurt when, Sarah Jessica Parker explained that she was playing the worst actress ever in this movie, But for Bela Lugosi Jr., again, no offense, because I think in the movie Ed Wood, Bela Lugosi swearing, I think it works. I think it's fine. Look, not every biopic film is going to be faithful to what happened in reality. There's always going to be changes, and sometimes, changes can work. And I think for the movie Ed Wood, what was in it that didn't happen in reality, I think it worked perfectly fine, don't you think? Okay, but getting back to the movie, Ed Wood, he calms down Bella, and, telling him, now, Dracula, that's a role that requires talent, and so on. He is, he's pissed at Conrad, and just telling him to, bug off, and so on. And thus they proceed filming, because, Ed was asking Bella, you want to get outside and get some fresh air, and so on, and Bella says, bullshit, I'm ready now, roll the camera. And thus they proceed filming. One scene where Bella, the dialogue that he gives, beware, beware of the big green dragon that sits on your doorstep. He eats little boys. And right before Ed was about to say cut, Bella going, wait! Pull the string! Pull the string! Yeah, that delivery of dialogue that Martin Landau gives. Yeah, fantastic. And continuing on filming Glen or Glenda, and also when it comes up to Dolores filming her scenes. And can't forget to mention, because when she read the script for Glen or Glenda, it dawns on her, and she realizes something about Eddie. And because she read it in her room, she opened the door, and thus she sees Eddie wearing one of her clothes. And because early on, she was wondering where her pink fluffy jacket was, and now she realizes where some of her clothes went missing, because Eddie took them and was wearing them and even stretched them out. And he reveals the truth to Dolores that when he was a little boy, his mother would dress him up as a girl, because his mother wanted a daughter, and it just became a habit, and perfectly, okay for Eddie to wear women's clothing. And Dolores, she's not too happy about this, and, Eddie even asked Dolores, do we break up, or do you want to be in the movie? However he said it. And thus, she is in the movie, and, the movie does finish filming, and that one famous shot, and just like, with the green screen background, Dolores giving the fluffy pink coat to Eddie, which that being the last shot of the movie Glen or Glenda, and thus, again, filming has officially wrapped, and Eddie is planning to make another movie, of course, and he screens it, gives a copy of it to someone by the name of, it was, who was it again? It was, Mr. Feldman, played by Stanley DeSantis, if I'm saying that right, I think, Mr. Feldman, because he works at Warner Brothers, I want to say, because they do mention Warner's, so obviously it's Warner Brothers. Screening Glen or Glenda, and because, Ed Wood proposes Mr. Feldman movies that he wants to do, and if, the studio is interested in doing them, like Dr. Acula and Bride of the Atom. And Bride of the Atom intrigues Mr. Feldman. But first, by screening the latest movie that Ed has made, which being Glen or Glenda. And unfortunately, that screening does not go so well. I mean, even at one point, Mr. Feldman started to crack up watching the movie. Hey, at least he laughed. He kind of was enjoying it. He was laughing, so, I mean, he even said that was funny. What he was watching was funny, so yeah. And unfortunately, because the movie Glen or Glenda is not screening all around the world. In fact, there's a phone call between Ed and Georgie, and it does not go too well. It does not go too well. And Georgie, telling Eddie, nobody wants to see this piece of shit, if I see you again, I'll kill you. And he hangs up, So, what's next for Eddie? Like, how's he gonna make another movie? Now, because, the first one he made turned out to be a huge disaster. But before Ed can make his next picture, he, Dolores, and Bunny are at a wrestling event, and Ed becomes intrigued with this one wrestler who he describes like, he's the size of a mountain, that being Tor Johnson, being played by, let me pull the late George the Animal Steele. So him portraying Tor Johnson, and you know what, because he did a fantastic job portraying Tor Johnson, because obviously in reality, because Tor Johnson, because he was this big, big, heavy wrestling guy, he was a sweetheart. He was a nice guy. And his interactions with Eddie, and when Eddie introduces himself, and, he's interested in Tor being in his next project. And it was pretty funny because, Tor asking him, because Eddie told him that he was in the picture business, and Tor asking him, like the Mickey Mouse? And Eddie going, yeah, you could say that, however he said it. And Eddie describing and telling Tor his next project, Bride of the Atom, and he'll be playing Lobo, and who is, you know, a gentle, kind creature, and who saves the girl. And Tor, he's on board for it, and he asks Eddie when's it going to start shooting, and, well, Eddie tells him that he doesn't know yet because, you know, barely anything has begun by trying to make this picture. But also, at one point, one evening, Eddie receives a disturbing call from Bella, because Bella calls him and asks him, you know, to help him, you know, Eddie, help me. Because when he arrives at Bella's house, he took, well, medicine, needles, and what was in those needles? Like, he was basically drugging himself. He had been a drug addict for 20 years, and he's broke, he doesn't know what he's gonna do, and Eddie is assuring Bella that he'll make it up to him and he'll help him. And still, having no luck trying to get the movie Bride of the Atom to be made, and he's trying to get Bella a job. There's nothing that he can do, and thus, he's trying to pitch Bride of the Atom to, you know, multiple movie studios, even at this, like, dinner party, whatever the heck it is, like, you know. Even, like, at one point, because, one of the phone calls that Eddie was taking, somebody asked him if Bella was available on Friday, and basically, Bella is to appear as Dracula on stage with a funny guy, and it doesn't really go too well, especially since Bella can't really do ad-lib, you know, improvise and so on, you know, especially, you know, for him and him being Hungarian, like, how can they expect a Hungarian to say some of these lines and so on, yeah. And both Eddie and Bella, they stumble upon and meet Criswell. This is where he finally shows up. And again, Criswell being played by Jeffrey Jones. And I got it wrong at first. He's not a telepathic, he's a psychic. God, what's wrong with me? Psychic, not a telepathic, I'm sorry, you know. It's one of those things, you know. So, a psychic, not a telepathic. So he's a psychic, and, you know, predicting things that can happen in the future, like something about man making their way to Mars in the 1970s, yeah. And, you know, he even tells Eddie that, you know, he's not really a psychic, it's just part of show business. But it is nice to see that Criswell joins in Eddie's group and, you know, being a friend of Eddie's. And, you know, Criswell, he's on board with Bride of the Atom, and again, this, restaurant and where... I think, yeah, I assume, like, movie producers and filmmakers, they meet and, you know, trying to pitch a movie and so on, and with the help of Criswell, you know, being a psychic, saying that, you know, I predict Bride of the Atom will be a huge moneymaker, etc. And it doesn't go well at first. But a little bit later, Eddie is by himself at a restaurant, at a bar, and he happens to hear a young lady who just arrived, you know, to Hollywood and has a lot of money, and this, you know, this intrigues Eddie, and he thinks at first, and at the time, that with this girl's money, you know, Bride of the Atom can be made, and this young lady named Loretta King being portrayed by Juliet Landau, and Loretta King becomes intrigued in this Bride of the Atom project, and is interested in taking on the lead role that was supposed to go to Eddie's girlfriend, Dolores. Dolores was supposed to play the lead main female character in Bride of the Atom, but Eddie, because he has no choice, he gives the lead role to Loretta, and this for sure pisses off Dolores. And, you know, Eddie assures Dolores that there are plenty of other roles that would be perfect for her, like, you know, the secretary and so on, and yeah, like, that's gonna work. And sure enough, the movie Bride of the Atom begins filming, and they just about shot 3 minutes of footage of Bride of the Atom, and unfortunately, they don't have the paycheck, to film in the studio, and thus they're booted out of the studio for now, and Ed Wood is once again trying to pitch Bride of the Atom to, movie producers and so on, and one of them asks Eddie, what role does Vampira have in Bride of the Atom, even though she's not a part of the movie, and Eddie goes up to Vampira asking her to be in the movie, and that doesn't work, of course. Vampira is not interested. And Vampira in Ed Wood, being portrayed by, at the time, Tim Burton's girlfriend, Lisa Marais. Yeah, Lisa Marais. She portrays Vampira, and, again, she was Tim Burton's girlfriend at the time, and she had been in a lot of Burton's films in the 90s and early 2000s, and she was the inspiration for the look and design of Sally in The Nightmare Before Christmas. Yeah. I bet some of you did not know that. So yeah, her portrayal as Vampira in this movie, I think she was fantastic. She was fantastic as Vampira. And, fun fact, Vampira is just like, what Elvira is. If some of you did not know that, and for those of you that don't know Vampira that much, so just saying. So still, no luck trying to make and finish Bride of the Atom up until Eddie meets with this guy who runs this meat plant, I want to say? Meat plant? Yeah, I think so. That being Old Man McCoy, being played by Rance Howard, the late Rance Howard, the father of Ron and Clint Howard. Yeah, that's him. And yeah, I mean, he is interested in helping making this movie, but under a few conditions, like changing the ending of the movie Bride of the Atom with a huge explosion, and having his son play the main lead role of the male character. And according to Old Man McCoy, his son is slow, but he thinks that his son can do it, can be a really good actor in Bride of the Atom. And when we see his son, he's rehearsing his lines, yeah, you can tell he is slow. Well, it was the only way to, get Bride of the Atom to be finished and made, so yeah. And then Dolores showed up on set, and yeah, things get a little bit out of hand between her and the new lead actress who took Dolores's part, and Eddie trying to keep it cool between the two ladies, and, with them filming one scene that they're in together, you can tell, because, and how they're acting and talking to one another, and Criswell showing up, and once they're done filming for the day, Eddie and the prop crew go a bit of an errand, getting a prop, because basically Eddie, Paul, Conrad, along with Tor and Criswell, they snuck into one of the major film studios, and they basically are stealing an octopus prop, and so they get it, and it was pretty funny because them breaking in and with the help of Tor, breaking in, the doors and gates, and Tor catching the octopus and it lands on him, and Criswell's saying, "Oh my God, we killed him," but Tor is okay, and it was funny. Tor says, "Better than wrestling." What with him and the octopus, it's better than actual wrestling for him. And so they're filming a night shoot, and Bella being there, and he at first tells Eddie that he can't do it. It seems like that he can't do a night shoot, but Eddie tells him to take a nap, and they'll call him once they're ready for him. And so by adding in water and placing the octopus, Well, unfortunately, Paul misplaced the octopus motor for the octopus's tentacles to move. Well, and this is kind of on Eddie, because he did not say anything about an octopus motor. Zippo. So now they just have a lifeless octopus prop, and when Bella is ready and Eddie guides Bella on what's going to happen in this scene, and, you know, he'll be wrestling with the octopus, and, you know, Bella has to move the octopus tentacles to make it look like that the octopus is fighting with Bella's character, and Bella does a pretty good job at it, and what's in the actual movie. So, yeah. And the next day after filming that night shoot, Eddie thanks Bella for, you know, so much that they've done, and especially, you know, what Bella did last night, you know, in the night shooting. And because how much Eddie, you know, thanked and appreciated what Bella did, Eddie wrote a speech for Bella, for his character in Bride of the Atom. And, you know, some of the dialogue that Bella says, and, you know, he quickly and easily memorizes the lines, you know, saying, "Home, I have no home. The jungle is my home." Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty good delivery of dialogue, and what was in the actual movie. And by the way, because, yes, the name of the movie, Bride of the Atom, is entirely different. You know, instead of Atom, it's Monster, but until I get to that. And so, Bride of the Atom has finished filming, that's a wrap, and thus they have the wrap party. We see Bunny is there with a group of Mexican musicians, like, you know, mariachi band. Basically, and can't forget to mention this, that early on, and when Bunny, Dolores, and Eddie were at the wrestling event/match, and where they discovered and met Tor, Bunny mentioned to Eddie and Dolores that he was going to Mexico, like that's how he says it, you know, but, you know, Mexico, etc. He was going to go to Mexico, and he was going to meet a surgeon to have his organs taken out, and he was going to become a woman. And because, you know, he saw and watched Glenn or Glenda, it made him realize what he wants to do, and so on. And, you know, even Bunny even said, you know, "Goodbye, penis," in front of a lot of people, even Dolores telling him to keep it down. Yeah, because, like, they're surrounded by a lot of people. They're going to hear him say that, so that was funny. And unfortunately, because Bunny never got to achieve, you know, becoming a woman, because his time at Mexico was horrible. His driver got killed, the luggage was stolen, and he had help from the mariachi band that are at the wrap party. And he's telling all this to Tor. And thus, what's going on at the wrap party? Well, it's just chaotic, like, not in a bad way, but, yeah, just seeing Eddie and drag, and they have a Indian musician, the late legendary Korla Pandit, if I'm saying his full name right, especially his last name. You know, again, you know me sometimes, but I think I did get it right. And he would pass away, I think, just a few years after appearing in Ed Wood. And the music and performance that Korla brings in the movie Ed Wood, oh, I love that piece of music that he plays on this, like, piano, like, you know, that plays like a piano, but also there's a bit of, like, bongo sounds to the piano, like the electric piano, you know, that Korla has. Oh, I love that. And it was pretty funny, Criswell putting a piece of money onto Eddie, and, you know, Eddie drags Bella in to dance, and Dolores, of course, being there, and she's not really having a good time there. And once the dance is finished, and, you know, everybody was cheering and applauding, Dolores then just shouts and saying, you know, "You people are idiots, you know, you're wasting your lives. Nobody wants to see these movies, you know, they're terrible." And she just let it out, and this was the moment where she was breaking up and leaving Eddie. And this is where I now mention this, that, the actual Dolores, like, a couple of things that she was not happy about, and she corrected on what happened in reality. It wasn't because that the Dolores left Eddie because, of his filmmaking and, being a drag and so on, transvestite, all that's in the movie. The reason that Dolores left Eddie is because of his alcoholism, which the movie never establishes. I think it does mention it a little bit, but not enough. So that's the reason why the Dolores left Eddie. And, well, because that, the movie didn't do this, I think how it did it, with Dolores leaving Eddie, I think it worked out fine. Like I said, there's always going to be changes in biopics, and, they just have to be done in a good way. You get what I'm saying? So after that, with Bride of the Atom being finished entirely, and with the breakup, between Eddie and Dolores, well, Eddie now by himself, and he has Vampira on TV, and he makes a call to Vampira right after she finishes filming her show, because it's live, and he asks Vampira out for dinner. I guess he wanted to date Vampira, but she turns Eddie down, I guess, probably not in a mean way. I mean, she did say to Eddie on the phone that, you seem like a nice guy, and okay, so come on, that's not too bad. But she does ask and tell Eddie to let her know when his movie comes out. So yeah, that's nice of her to say. And so after that, Eddie receives a phone call, because again, he called Vampira this time, and after they hung up, he receives a phone call from Bela Lugosi, and here we go again, because Bela just, disturbingly on the phone asking Eddie to help him. Eddie, help me. And what happens this time, when Eddie arrives at Bela's house, he has a gun. He was going to kill himself, end his life, because he tells Eddie that he received a message and call from the government that they were canceling his unemployment. And yeah, just Bela is completely broke and, unable to pay the next rent. Yeah, it's unfortunate. And this is where Bela is taken into hospital for treatment, committing himself and so on. And, he even apologizes to Eddie for what he's doing and by having the gun. And, he even told Eddie, and asked him, come with me. We can be at peace and so on. But again, Bela is taken in for treatment and so on. And, Eddie, staying there at the hospital, he then meets who would become his official true love, and that being Cathy O'Hara, being betrayed by Patricia Arquette, who'd be best known for, being in shows and movies like the Hulu series The Act, Disney's Holes, and her role as the mother in Boyhood. Yeah. So Cathy O'Hara, who, because she's in the hospital because of her father, and she can knit, and make pairs, and Eddie, interacting with Cathy, and it's going pretty good, and he introduces himself, and so does Cathy to Ed, and Eddie asks Cathy, how many times has her father been to the hospital? And the best way she describes it, by making, pairs and such for her father, this is her 13th pair. That explains how many times her father's been in the hospital. Yeah. Because Eddie and Cathy seem to hit it off pretty good, and, how Bela is doing, being treated, and so on, because of, all this junk that's in him, and even when, say, there was this press that was, taking photography of Bela Lugosi, because in reality, because Bela was the first ever actor to, commit himself and, be treated and so on, and Eddie just, shoot off the press because people like those, like paparazzi and such, oh, they can be a nightmare. Like, yeah, Eddie knows, but Bela told Eddie, let them take pictures of me. Let me be on the news and paper and so on. Yeah, and it's just amazing because, I've watched the behind the scenes, and Martin Landau, he talked about, seeing that actual photo of Lugosi, in the hospital, and how he looked, just how skinny and short he looked in that picture, and how Martin wanted to do the same thing. Like, he wanted to do that in the movie, and you know what? He succeeded. Like, yeah, talk about Martin Landau, just someone like Martin Landau being true to an actual person. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. And more on Eddie and Kathy because, again, they seem to hit it off pretty good, and she starts to really like Eddie, and Eddie starts to really like Kathy too, and they go to this local fair, like state fair, carnival, whatever, and, they talk about what their childhoods were like, and their love for movies, and especially they talk about Dracula, and how Dracula, for both of them, it was their first horror movie that each of them saw, and they went and rode on a spook house, and at one point the spook house breaks down, and this was the moment where Eddie told Kathy, because, he told Kathy and explained to her that, he never told any girl that he went on a date with, like, went on a first date with, never told any girl until Kathy, he tells her that he likes to wear women's clothing. Because, wearing women's clothing to him, like, makes him feel comfortable and feel close to women. And Kathy asks him, you don't like sex with girls? But, he assures Kathy that, no, I love sex with girls. And Kathy is thinking about it, and the next thing that she says is, okay. She's fine with it. This is the right girl for Eddie, and ever since, yeah... Nice to see. True love right there for Eddie and Kathy. And of course, the spook house starts up again, and yeah, after that moment, so... Yeah, and what happens next? Back at the hospital, because Bela is now let go of, and it's kind of a bad sign because of paying for, for his treatment and stuff like that, and, Eddie has to lie to Bela, but, Bela seems okay, and, Eddie thinks and tells Bela that he looks perfectly okay. So after that, and Bela seems to be completely all right, like, the junk was taken out of him and so on, then, the premiere of Ed's new movie, now titled Bride of the Monster, is happening. Bride of the Monster. And he calls up Vampira, offering her an invite to join with Eddie and his fellow castmates and friends to the premiere of Bride of the Monster. And that sequence where they're at the premiere, because nobody's outside of the movie theater, but when they go inside, even those movie theater employees, they gave Eddie a heads up that everybody is tearing up the place. These rowdy, wild teenagers at the premiere of Bride of the Monster. Oh my gosh, like, how did they get these people? Like, how? And what was their purpose? If they're just being rowdy and so on, why are they there? Just, oh my gosh, if you get what I'm saying. But it is pretty hilarious, and no doubt about it, because they're all acting like wild animals. And the premiere is just getting too rambunctious and out of control because of, the rowdy young people there and such, and they're just throwing popcorn everywhere, and one young kid like touched Vampira's boobs, and Eddie's going in to help them because it's him, Kathy, Bella, Vampira, Criswell, and Tor Johnson. They're all there, and he tells Criswell, Bella, Vampira, and Tor to knock him dead, to put on a show for them right before the movie starts. And it just gets out of hand, and Eddie is quick enough to save them and to get out of there. And when they get back outside, the vehicle that they drove in, well, it was being torn apart by some of those rowdy teenagers. And then all of the other rowdy, wild animal teenagers come out, and, were they about to, tackle them or something? What were they doing anyways? They're gonna do something. And they are quick enough to get a taxi. Even Kathy, she jumps on top of the taxi, begging the taxi driver to stop, and they get out of there. And it was pretty funny when Bella said, "Now that was a premiere." It sure was. It sure was a premiere, Bella. And after that, because Eddie and Bella, they were talking about, what happened at the premiere last night, and how Eddie pointed out, did you see that young boy touching Vampira's boobs? And they thought it was funny. And Eddie feels sorry for Bella that he didn't get to see the movie. But Bella assures Eddie that, he can memorize the movie, and thus he says his lines that, he says in the movie, "Home, I have no home. The jungle is my home." And that draws a little bit of attention from a small group of people. They applaud, and one of them asks for Bella's autograph. And things are looking pretty good for Bella as of now. But then, the next scene, Ed Wood was reading a story to Kathy about saucers and such, and he received a phone call. Unfortunately, Bella sadly passed away, and thus we have Bella's funeral. And if you noticed, this is true, Bella himself wrote as a request to be buried wearing his Dracula costume. Yeah, very fitting for Bella, because, the one and only Dracula finally laid to rest, So, yeah. And not a lot of people are there for Bella's funeral. Just Eddie, Kathy, Criswell, Vampira, Tor Johnson, and, two of Eddie's friends, workers, Paul and Conrad. Yeah. I don't think Bunny was in there. I'm not sure. And so, after Bella passed away, because, not to mention, Eddie shot one last bit of footage with Bella, and this was before the premiere of Bride of the Monster. Eddie had Bella shoot some film for his next film project. And the next film project that Eddie is working on, and he has an interaction with his landlord named Ed Reynolds, being portrayed by Clive Rosengren, if I'm saying the last name right. Ed asks Eddie, the rent check, and Eddie has Ed come in, and Ed Reynolds discovers and notices that Ed Wood is in the picture business, and he mentions to Ed Wood that he and his fellow Christians at a church are interested in film business, and they don't have the money to make, they want to make 11 or 12 religious films, but this gives Eddie an idea, they have enough money to make one movie, and Eddie proposes to Ed Reynolds of a project that Ed Wood has been working on, being titled Grave Robbers from Outer Space, and it's science fiction. And yeah, Ed Reynolds is kind of a bit hesitant on this. Like, you know, he understands that science fiction is popular, but just what's going on in the movie and grave robbers and so on. It doesn't take too long for, you know, the people at the church to help make this movie, and thus, you know, with the money and profits that this movie could make, then they can make the 10 and 11 religious films that they want to do. And, you know, Ed Wood mentioned and showed to Ed Reynolds that he has the last piece of footage that Bela Lugosi ever shot, and Ed Reynolds was, you know, he said that I thought he passed on, and yeah, this is when he did finally pass on, because again, throughout most of the movie, everybody was thinking that that Bela had died, but he finally did. So yeah. So work in progress on Grave Robbers from Outer Space is a go, and Ed is in search for Bela Lugosi lookalikes, you know, stand-ins for Bela Lugosi with the help of Bunny, but not like so far they got 3, and they look nothing or look closely they don't look anything closely like Bella, you know, just yeah, like one is too big, one is too short, and so on. So then Eddie and Kathy, like, it was because Kathy, she's working on the flying saucers, and she notices on a piece of a newspaper that Vampira was fired, and thus Eddie goes to Vampira, giving her a job to be a part of his next project, even Kathy assuring Vampira on what Eddie's doing. And while Eddie and Kathy, they're trying to convince and assure Vampira to be in the movie, and Vampira requests that her character be mute, Kathy's, what was it again? The chiropractor? Yeah, chiropractor. Kathy's chiropractor shows up where they're at, because they're at a restaurant. Dr. Tom Mason, being portrayed by Ned Bellamy, if I'm saying his last name right. Yeah, so Ned Bellamy portrays Kathy's chiropractor, and at one point the doctor, like, gives Kathy like a neck massage or something, like just like a snap in the neck, like, you know. And Eddie notices the shape and look of the doctor's head, and by putting a napkin over his mouth, like, he's perfect. He's the one that will work being, you know, a stand-in, you know, like a stand-in for the late Bela Lugosi, you know, and thus he gets the job. And then we see Eddie, Bunny, Tor, Criswell, Vampira, Kathy, Paul, Conrad, and Kathy's chiropractor at the church, and the Reverend Lemon being portrayed by G.D. Spradlin, if I'm saying that right. Yeah, they have to get baptized, and all because, you know, that the people at the church agreed to work on Ed Wood's next film project. And Bunny looking at Dr. Tom and saying that he doesn't look anything like Bela Lugosi, and by, you know, doing this and, you know, I'm going to suck your blood, and Bunny now sees it that, yeah, he does look like Bela Lugosi. And it was pretty funny, Bunny saying to Dr. Tom, now let's hear you say Boris Karloff is a cocksucker. And Eddie just has him to just keep it down and telling him, you know, we want these baptism people to like us. Yeah, and they do it at a pool, being baptized, all because Brother Tor could not fit in the holy water, like that would be at a church. Yeah, all because Tor could not fit in there, and so they have to do it at a pool. It's pretty funny. It's pretty funny with the whole baptism thing, and thus they begin to film and work on the Grave Robbers from Outer Space, the original film title. And at first, things do not go so well when they begin filming Grave Robbers from Outer Space. Between Ed Wood and the people of the church, yeah. Like, they're not sure on the title, and they suggest a new title, that being Plan 9 from Outer Space, which, that of course, being the official title for the movie. Because, at first, Eddie does not like the sound of the title, that's ridiculous. And thus, they film, they're not sure on Tor's part, why Eddie gave him the dialogue. Well, because, Bela Lugosi having, dead and Vampira being mute, someone had to have the dialogue. And things really get out of hand, like when, the church's choir director steps in, and he is to play the main lead, the hero of the picture, and Eddie is just, he can't believe what he's hearing, and that delivery of dialogue that Johnny gives as Ed Wood, are you people insane? I'm the director. I make the casting decisions around here. That was good. And then, because Reverend Lemon then said to Eddie, I thought this was a group effort, and Eddie going, no! And Eddie just saying to himself, they're driving me crazy! These baptism people are stupid, stupid, stupid! And he's just, very upset about this, and in order for him to calm down, he puts on women clothing. And when he steps out in women's clothing, the church people, they are shocked. They are disgusted by what they're seeing, what Ed Wood is wearing. And Eddie, that didn't help. He can't take it anymore, because, he goes, that's it! I can't take it! And thus he takes a cab to the nearest bar, and while at the bar and he has Imperial whiskey, he stumbles upon the legendary Orson Welles, and Orson Welles being betrayed by Vincent D'Onofrio. Yeah. And there were a couple of times where Vincent D'Onofrio betrayed Orson Welles. Like, there was this short film that can be found on YouTube where he's betraying Orson Welles, and he does a pretty good spot-on job impersonating Orson Welles. But the thing is, in Ed Wood, his voice was dubbed by legendary voice actor Maurice LaMarche, aka the voice of Brain from Pinky and the Brain / Animaniacs, yeah. The reason why is because Tim Burton was unhappy with, the performance that Vincent D'Onofrio gave, trying to sound like Orson Welles. I'm pretty sure, yeah, that's what it was. Well, look, I'm sure as though that for Vincent D'Onofrio, he tried his best trying to sound like Orson Welles. I have no doubt about it. I mean, doing the mannerisms, for Orson Welles, he does a pretty good job at it. And, like the hair that Vincent D'Onofrio has, playing Orson Welles, pretty good too. But it's understandable. And you know what? Maurice LaMarche, he can do a pretty good voice impression of Orson Welles. So, yeah, Ed Wood, he stumbles upon and meets Orson Welles, and throughout this movie, Ed Wood at times mentions, Orson Welles and how he is a huge fan of Orson Welles. And there's a pretty good moment between Ed and Orson, because, well, they share a lot in common, because them fighting with movie producers and, when some of their movies had to be, were recut and so on. And Orson does give Ed some advice. Like, for one thing, because Citizen Kane, definitely being mentioned, because, and it's true, because the movie producers, like the studio, I should say, they hated and didn't understand Citizen Kane at all. And, Orson Welles, the fact that he was 26 when he made Citizen Kane, he did establish and told Ed that the studio did not touch a frame, even though they hated it and didn't understand it. And look at Citizen Kane, like, it's become a legendary movie. It for sure made movie history. Yeah. I would like to think, I'm pretty sure that probably the movie studio that distributed Citizen Kane, they probably took back what they said about Citizen Kane when Citizen Kane was received very well. Don't you think? Yeah. So Orson Welles, he gives Ed advice, not to let a dream die and so on. Why waste your life on a dream? However he said it to Ed. And thus he puts his foot down and he tells the church people that, they're going to do it his way. Just shut up and let me do my movie the way I want to do it. And thus everything's looking good now for Ed, and thus he films his movie the way he wants it, and with a really good montage, really good score, from Howard Shore, them filming Plan 9, and how the movie Ed Wood, recreates those iconic shots, from Ed Wood's movies like Glenn or Glenda, Bride of the Monster, Plan 9 from Outer Space, and the fact that Ed Wood focuses on those three movies. Yeah, I mean, there were a few other movies that Ed Wood had done in between, like, say, Glenn or Glenda, Bride of the Monster, and Plan 9 from Outer Space, but in the movie, it's focused on those three movies, and it does a pretty good job at that. And even Ed Wood told the church people that, I like that. He likes it now. The title, Plan 9 from Outer Space, it's a fitting title, and thus, that's the name of the movie. Yeah, Plan 9 from Outer Space. And so, filming for Plan 9 from Outer Space has wrapped up, the movie is finished, and then we come to the premiere of Plan 9 from Outer Space. And like at the beginning of the movie, and up to the end, it was raining, because it happened at the beginning of the film, and it happens at the end. At the premiere of Plan 9 from Outer Space, it's a big crowd. It has a huge audience at a big theater, and this was Ed Wood's moment that, because this is what he wanted, and how it didn't really work out when, it came to Glenn or Glenda, or, especially Bride of the Monster. But for this, this definitely feels like a Hollywood premiere. And Criswell introducing Ed Wood and all that Ed Wood can say right before the movie begins. He says, I just want to say, this film, this is for Bela. And so it is. Plan 9 from Outer Space being Bela Lugosi's final film where he appears on screen. Yeah. And thus, the movie is playing, and, the look and smiles on some of the crew's faces, and especially Ed Wood, and he's lip-syncing to the narrative dialogue, and Ed says to himself, this is the one. This is the one I'll be remembered for. And, yeah, pretty much. I mean, everybody else, no doubt about it, they discovered all the other movies that Ed Wood had made, and probably because of Plan 9 from Outer Space, and, years to come for the late Ed Wood. And after the premiere, it's still pouring the rain, and Ed Wood, tells Kathy that they should get married. Let's get married right now. We'll drive to Vegas. And thus, they get in the car while it's pouring the rain. It's only a 5-hour drive, according to Eddie, and thus they head on to Vegas to get married, and we get some texts explaining where these people were after Plan 9 from Outer Space, and, well, with the movie coming to an end. Where was Ed Wood? Where was Kathy, Vampira, the late Bela Lugosi, Paul, Conrad, Tor, Criswell, and even Dolores. Yeah. So, and that beautiful piece of music that's playing during that text, and that being in most biopic films, like the aftermath and what happened, that kind of stuff in some biopic films. Yeah, and that was a fitting way to end the movie right there, for sure. Yeah. Ed Wood, just fantastic. What more do I have to say? Tim Burton's Ed Wood is a fantastic biopic film, and for it being a Tim Burton film, the storytelling, the acting, the music and score, just everything in Tim Burton's Ed Wood, fantastic. And for it being one of my all-time favorite movies, in my top list of favorite movies. And I'm giving Tim Burton's Ed Wood 10 out of 10 stars. Yes, 10 out of 10 stars for Tim Burton's Ed Wood. And what about you guys? What did you think of Tim Burton's Ed Wood itself? Like, is it one of your favorite biopic films? One of your favorite Tim Burton films? Everything about Ed Wood, all that I've had to say. And what did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review video a like, as always. So, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Tim Burton's Ed Wood. More review videos are on the way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward, and I'll see you guys in the next video/review. And of course, continuing on, me reviewing some of my all-time favorite movies. The next film I'm going to be reviewing, well, let's just say this is Pixar's 4th feature film. Yeah, stay tuned for that later tonight. And happy anniversary to Tim Burton's Ed Wood. Take care, and peace out.